Well, welcome to another episode of BOACast, Becoming Our Age, where we focus on learning, laughs, relationships, and responsibility to help us become who we want to become. Producer Duke, good to see you today.
Good to be here.
Nice to have you physically in studio instead of virtually.
Always a pleasure to be here in person.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Today, we were going to do a little bit more time on relationships and why I chose this as one of the four core things of becoming our age. And I think this one might be the most self-explanatory, but maybe that's my priors. Anyway, so as we think about a full, well-rounded human being who's living in a healthy way, who has purpose and direction, human beings live in community with each other. That's what we do. And when we live in community with each other, our relationships are incredibly important. So as we navigate those relationships, we should do so with some skill. We should do so with some intention, right? Relationships require attention. And I've mentioned before that these four things I've seen in all cases. I've seen people do them poorly and how it hurts them in their life. This one in particular is one of the more difficult ones for me. At least in my own head, it's one of the more difficult ones for me. Mm-hmm. So it's one that I like to talk about and be cautious about. And part of this is my personality is fairly task-oriented, right? I look at our objective, I chase our objective, I go from thing to thing, and I want people to be on the path with me, but I find a lot of things in common with others when we're aligned moving towards a goal, right? When we're in a community that's not just like a passive community focused on belonging, but a community that's focused on let's get a job done. So, sports teams is an example. Work is an example, right? You are involved in some sort of structure or hierarchy where each of you has a portion of the work that you do, and you have specializations that help you to achieve things.
Right.
And what different people look for in their relationships is different. But communication is a key part of it. Showing up when you're needed, presence. And you see this with kids, you see this on teams, showing up is 80%.
Yeah.
Right? Just being there and being mentally present as well. Right? That's a huge portion of it. But people want you to think about them. You should be using their name. Try to remember people's names. Mm-hmm. Duke. And call them by the correct name and use their name as you talk to them. But yeah. So one of the things to understand about relationships is that not everyone is going to be your best friend. And I do think it's interesting to hearken back to, the podcast we did about you are not the main character.
Yeah.
and the piece we wrote. Your interaction with people is going to be different based on what they're doing, what you're doing, the goals you have, what relationships you have in common, whether or not you're blood related, and how much that matters in the culture that you're in. In some cultures, being blood related is a really big deal. And in some cultures, being blood related, you pick your family when you grow up, right?
Right.
And so there's a variety of different ways to pick apart those values. But not everyone's going to be the same. You can't treat everyone like they'll be your best friend. And values alignment is incredibly important for people that are going to be in your close circle. A lot of people talk about, you have a really close circle of friends and people that you're responsible for, right? So your romantic partner, if you have one, right? Wife, husband, children, that sort of inner part of your circle, you are directly responsible for those folks and you have to take care of them. But your relationship with your kids is not going to be the same as your relationship with your spouse. And that's not going to be the same as your relationship with your closest friends. And you can't always depend on everyone for everything, right? It's interesting too when you talk about, there are people who will say, don't reveal, if you're a man, don't reveal all of your feelings to your wife. That's not what she's there for. Mm-hmm. Use your close guy friends to have an outlet there. And a lot of guys don't feel safe with their close guy friends, but they don't know exactly how to navigate that situation. Mm-hmm. And there is something to be said for that point of view. I think there's also something to be said for, that person who you've selected to do life with as a companion for the rest of your life, that you should be able to both support each other and buffer each other and take care of each other, right? So I've kind of hewed more towards be more open with your spouse, but I've also seen why people say, don't say everything to your spouse. Don't be completely open with your struggles and your challenges with your spouse. That's interesting. And I think there are some cultures that do it better than we do.
Well, why would you, without getting too personal, is there anything you can share about what you've seen or observed in other people's lives or your own life, why people might have that approach?
Yeah, well, exactly. I think it depends upon a little bit what you and your spouse need each other for. And in a lot of cases, if the man is being looked to, and I'm speaking about men because that's my most familiarity. So I apologize for having a more limited view on this particular topic.
I apologize for being a person who only has my perspective.
Yeah. I try to expand my understanding of others' perspectives, but this is one where I'm going to just speak from what I've observed with men and what I've observed in my own experience. When the man is the one who's providing more emotional stability, which is not every relationship, but when the man is the one providing more emotional stability, he doesn't have very many legitimate reasons where he can show any weakness on that particular front, because it changes the dynamic of the relationship in very subtle ways that play out over long periods of time. That's what I would say. And I want to be careful with it. And I have friends and family members that hate that view, and they don't want it to be true, but it's true, right? At what percentage is it true? I don't know. I just will say that men showing weakness to people who depend on them to be strong can change the dynamic of that relationship. And it might be obvious and it might be really subtle and you don't realize it's happening, and then it plays out over a long period of time. So some care there. And obviously, I'm not talking about abusive situations. Those are more clear and obvious, right? Those are, if somebody is using your points of vulnerability against you to win an argument in the future, that's a different situation, right? Mm-hmm. And don't be the one who does that. And don't tolerate that from someone else either.
And I think it's interesting you point out the emotional security aspect, because there are, I think that can manifest in different ways. I think if a man goes to his wife, I think ideally a man should be able to go to his wife and be like, there's this person at work and they've been flirting with me and I don't want to engage with this, but it's difficult. I have to be around them. It's been very tempting for me. I don't want to, I don't know what I should do. Even if you're just going should I for advice as oh, my spouse is my best friend. I want advice on what should I do. Mm-hmm. Some wives are secure enough in their relationship or with their own body or attractiveness level or whatever that would not make them feel insecure, and they could give real advice on, oh, we should try and look into, do we need to like file sexual harassment, or do we need to try and get you a new job, or get into a different department, change to working nights so you don't have to encounter this person. Whatever drastic, a lot of people, like rightfully so, will take very drastic measures to protect their marriage, and I think that's a right thing to do. But a lot of men would not want to mention something like that to their spouse because their spouse would spiral on, he doesn't find me attractive. All they'd hear in that whole thing of, I'm trying to save us. All they would hear is, there's someone else that you find attractive and I'm not attractive, or I'm not the most attractive, or I'm not enough for you in some way. And
well, I think going back to your statement, one of the things you said, it's tempting for me. That would be absolutely alarming.
But I'm saying it in terms of, should you be honest with your spouse? You can argue, should you withhold that part of the information? Well, I'm saying if you were being 100% honest, because there are people who say, oh, I'm 100% honest with my spouse all the time about everything. And that is doable. I do think it's possible, but I think both people have to be in a secure attachment with each other. And I think they have to be in a good relationship with themselves and understand who they are. They have to be able to recognize that they're on the same team and that they're both committed to that team.
Yep.
And they both have to believe that about the other person. If they have any reason to doubt that other person, some of that can be they were cheated on in the past by someone who's not this person, but it still makes them feel less secure in that person isn't going to leave me.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of factors, and some of them you don't know. Not everyone knows the full romantic history and the baggage that their spouse has.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that a lot of people just hide stuff like that because they don't want to upset their spouse or risk driving a rift between them over something like that. And I think if you were in a situation like that and you were like, oh, this person's flirting with me, I kind of like it, I don't know what to do. If you can't speak to your spouse about it and you don't have someone else in your life you can speak to about that, who can give you good advice and help you preserve your marriage, which I believe that's what your attendants are for after the wedding, is that they are there to help ensure that you follow through on these vows to the best of their abilities. Obviously, they can't walk that path for you, but they are promising to make themselves available to help you if they can. That's how I view it anyway. If a man has to face that temptation by himself and does not open up to anybody else, that is when that is going to be the hardest for him to
most difficult
avoid. The best, we are strongest together as a species, even in groups of two. And so I do, like you're saying, I think in most situations, if that was your scenario or something similar, you need to have another person that you can talk to about those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's not your spouse, which is very likely is not, you need to have another male relationship that you can have real conversation with and not just talk about the sports teams that you both like, or there's an interesting dynamic of relationships that are based on some sort of shared interest or shared belief versus friendships that are based on a more holistic approach to that person. I like that person and I am friends with that person, and their beliefs are peripheral to that. Their interests and hobbies are peripheral to that. So that when we are 80 years old and they can no longer go on long bike rides with me like we used to, or we can no longer play softball like we used to, that person still is value to me as a friend. And it's not, my relationship with them is not purely based on we have the same interest in this thing.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value there in understanding that alignment, right? Yeah, and as you have longer term relationships, I'm kind of getting a little bit off of the direction I was going, but I'll come back. As you get longer in your relationships, those relationships change over time. hopefully they grow. Hopefully they change in a positive way over time.
They need to, yes.
But
You're at different stages of life.
Yeah, but those relationships change over time. And so, I had several relationships with single folks that, after I got married, those were able to continue. But once I had kids, those relationships were very difficult to maintain because our life stages were so different. And I had a challenge meeting the needs that they were looking for from me, right? Just my time was very compressed. Was very focused on making sure I made enough to provide for my family and in a sufficient way. Priorities change over time and the relationships shift over time. And some of those folks I've been able to connect with more as their life stage has changed, and we're a few years ahead in terms of the stage, but we're close to each other in terms of the age, right? Age and stage are kind of two different things. Anyway, there's a lot of different moving parts there. But so you have your romantic relationships where, hopefully you're treating each other as companions, as equals, and interacting very directly, very openly, as much as practical to maintain a healthy relationship dynamic there. You have your relationship with your kids, which also changes drastically over time because you start out as an authority. And over time, you are less of an authority and more of a coach. And then you move out of that coaching stage and kind of into friend, potentially confidant, potentially, there's a lot of different ways.
Kind of friendship, but I think friendship is probably.
Yeah. I think there are better words in other languages to describe this.
There's not really a word. Yeah. Because it's not like the same kind of friendship as obviously you have with your friends that you would make.
Yeah.
But it's probably, depending on the relationship you actually have, is probably on a spectrum between mentor and friend.
Yes.
Perhaps more friend than an actual mentor might be.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps more mentor than a lot of your friends.
Yeah.
Hopefully your parents, if they've lived in any kind of good way with their lives, have some experience, have some wisdom, even if that's from a lot of mistakes, that they can still advise you on things. Even if it's as simple as, well, my dad said to do this, and I know how his life turned out, so I'm going to do not that.
Right.
Even that can still have like a value to you as a mentor kind of role.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I would put most parent-child relationships, and as they enter adulthood, is transitioning from like a coaching, which is not that coaching and mentoring is not totally dissimilar either, but coach still has more authority than like a mentor does. A mentor is much more voluntary, and it's much more like they have no power over your life,
right?
Really.
Yeah, and I think that you and I, but we all, speaking to the audience for a moment, we all have known people whose parents have not navigated that well and have attempted to stay in a position of authority because they're demanding respect. And so they want to be in that position of authority, and I'm more knowledgeable than you, I'm more experienced than you, you needed to defer to me in every way. I think we all have seen that. And that's a warning for us to recognize that changes the relationship dynamic, but it also it destroys the opportunity for true depth in that relationship as they grow into their adult lives, because eventually they must say, you know what? No. Yeah, okay, you've got more experience than me, and I'm a different human with different values, and no, I'm not doing that.
Or my understanding or my investment in the situation is higher than yours, so it's easier to say. It's easy for for someone to say, "Oh, you should invest that money into this, or you should put it into this savings," when they're not the ones staring down the barrel of credit card bills or other demands on your life.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's great. You don't understand where I am exactly, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your advice would be more applicable if you did.
Yeah.
But that's just the reality. No one knows. No one knows.
Yeah.
Really. No one knows. Your parents can give you advice, but they don't know what the best result's going to be. And you can ignore their advice, but you don't know what the best result's going to be.
Right.
Ultimately, it's down to you to make a decision and live your life and live with those choices.
Yeah. And so something like, here's what my experience looked like. When I had a stressor that reminds me of this, and here's what my experience was like, and here's how I overcame it. And at sometimes, how can I help? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there needs to be maturity on both sides of that relationship of not coming in to solve the problem as an authority figure once they're an adult, but also on the side of the child to actually want to take ownership to solve that problem and address it on their own, instead of having the parent intervene in a way that might short-term relieve stress, but long-term doesn't help.
Right.
Yeah. Or, and there's also the immature reaction of, I'll do it myself, which fine. You can do that. And I think there's virtue in saying, I really need to handle this on my own, which is a lot different than do it myself. Right.
Functionally similar, but yes,
Yes.
the attitude behind it is very important. And the potential growth is going to be dramatically impacted by that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you go into it, say, I'm going to do this by myself, and it's more of there's an insecurity behind saying that.
Mm-hmm.
The odds that if you mess up, that you're going to take on, oh, I messed up. What did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
How can I do it better next time? And really approach that in a mature way are very low.
Mm-hmm.
More likely, you're going to blame others for why it didn't work the way that you had wanted to or hoped. You may even blame your parents for you didn't support me enough, or you didn't do this or that, where that completely cuts you off from any potential benefits of that failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, so we've spent a lot of time on a spouse, child, parent, but let's move more into relationships that you choose, or relationships due to proximity, right? So if you're...
Which can also be spouse, to be fair.
Duke with the shotgun wedding. So not really. It's a joke. Don't come after me.
Town of 16 people. These are your choices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you are, working with somebody professionally, either as a colleague or a boss or a client, whatever the case is, there's some level of relationship there. It might be purely business. I need thing, I have thing, let's talk, right? And it might be strictly that, or it might be something a little bit deeper. And you want to be cordial, you want to be affable, you want to expect trust, right? And follow through on both sides of that equation, because that's what helps business to flow. And again, you don't want to make it into something it's not, because if it's an exchange of goods or exchange of services, that doesn't inherently mean that person is your friend in a deeper way than just the politeness of that exchange.
Right.
And it's a little weird to say that out loud, but there are people who might need to hear it, right? Somebody who works with you and somebody who works for you, they might be friendly just for the sake of being friendly, to grease the wheels, to get things done. And this is one too that, have you heard the saying, it's lonely at the top?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as people move into management roles, as they run businesses, as they move up a corporate structure, whatever the case is, it becomes really difficult to know who their friends are versus the people who need things from them. And they tend to, stay in touch with friends that they had from before their success,
Mm-hmm.
with, people they align with on interests and side things, and assume less about their relationships at work.
This is part of the reason that like famous actors often end up marrying each other,
Mm-hmm.
is because they know that this isn't a fan
Right.
that I'm dating. This is someone who also is in this line of work.
Yeah.
They recognize this is a job. It's not, despite all the glamour, it's still just a job.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to connect with people who are on a lower strata of fame because you don't know their objectives. You don't know if they're in it for you or for the perks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. So, I mean, I haven't reached massive heights of success or anything. But I have been,
It's overrated.
I have been in several positions where I was in charge, and I had a lot of people that I would maintain positive relationships with, friendly relationships with, and even connect, outside of work with, here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was hard to know. And it was hard to know, okay, so which of these people are just greasing the wheels to make business run smoother and we're having a good time together, but there's nothing deeper? And which of these are people that when I'm outside of their circle of influence or they're outside of my circle of influence for a little while, for more than 3 months, was this a connection of convenience? Was this a connection of pure business? Or is there something deeper there? And those connections of convenience, they can be incredibly positive. And I've found over, 15 years in corporate positions, I've found that many of the people that I considered my friends were friends who were connections of convenience.
Right.
And fortunately, I found that, or at least I perceive, that the people that, I wasn't sure if they were friends of convenience or if they wanted something from me, I found more of them were friends of convenience than actually, connecting with me specifically because they needed something from me.
Users.
Mm-hmm. So that was a positive finding for my life, particularly in the environment that I was in. And
I think people want to be that.
Yeah.
I think a healthy person wants to at least be on friendly terms with people.
Exactly.
To like people.
Yeah.
If they have to interact with you regularly, they want to like you.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there aren't people who are aggravating or will find you aggravating or things like that. But I think that the default setting is people want to be liked and they want to be around people that they like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if they have to interact with people by default, they want to like that person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that speaks more to those lighter relationships. So, relationships in business, relationships with clients, relationships of convenience, and then relationships with people who want something from you, which, can be, taker, can be manipulator, can be,
Right.
Can be negative, but it can also just be you have something they want and they're curious. Some of those folks where you have a relationship with them because they want something from you, those are potential mentees. Those are people who are looking for coaching. And that can be...
If the thing that they want is wisdom or something like that, absolutely, that can be a good thing.
And that can be tremendously rewarding for both the person giving and receiving. Right. So that's another thing, like just because they want something from you doesn't mean necessarily that it's bad. But there are other there are people who take advantage in a negative way too. The relationships you have through shared values, shared interests, shared community, and we've pieced apart community versus tribe before, right? A shared interest can lead you towards tribalism, or it can lead you towards community. Just for the sake of this, I consider community to be something where you are putting in value for others and others are giving value back to you. And a tribe is something where you have easy identifiers of who your friends are and who not your friends are, right? And so, quick version of that, sports teams taps directly into our brains where tribalism lives. And that's okay. That's fine. However, a member of your tribe and a member of your community are not necessarily equal candidates for quality friends. And so you probably want to lean more on a community where you are investing in them, they're investing in you, and there's back and forth and some expectations of behavior there.
I think that the thing that often gets overlooked, because I think it's easier to find friendship or camaraderie centered around a shared interest. A share that can be
or task.
Clubs, that can be work friends. That's a task based, like you said, going to a sports bar and you can strike up a conversation with anyone who's wearing the same jersey as you. And they will probably be very friendly towards you. They might even buy you a drink. I've had that happen. Random people just bought me stuff because I was wearing the right jersey. So that can be very beneficial. But if you want to have actual friendship, more so than shared interest is the shared values, the shared worldview. If you are going to someone for advice and they do not agree with you on the ultimate value of life, the ultimate goal of life, what their priorities are in life, where they go to for as a source for advice or direction on ethics or morality, if they have a different view about what does the afterlife or eternity look like, depending on what the scenario is, that can be a huge factor in what kind of advice they give you. If I go to someone who is in my field and I'm asking advice about my field, they can give me very helpful advice. I might even be able to form a mentor-mentee relationship in specific to that. That does not mean that I necessarily listen to them on advice on all matters. I do not necessarily listen to them on advice whether or not I should get a divorce, whether or not I should get married, whether or not I should have or not have kids, the timing of those decisions. All of those things are very dependent on whether or not we agree on what our priorities in life, what our values are, what we find valuable, what gives us meaning. And like I said, I think that worldview really sums up all of those concepts. And we see that at play in like cultural context of Eastern culture versus Western culture, Muslim culture versus Christian cultures. There's a lot of things, even though they do not prohibit us from coexisting in the same space necessarily, there are a lot of things where we just fundamentally disagree on human rights or the value of human life. Sometimes, like, that can change. That can be different from culture to culture, historically and contemporary. So I think so much, like, to me, the key to building a friendship that is real and can stand the test of life and provide value to you and the other person that's the central component, is finding people that you can connect with on a worldview, to where you ask them for advice and you say, oh, that's interesting. That's very useful to me. I hadn't thought of it in that way before. Not, oh, that's very interesting. I shouldn't ever talk to you again. Those can be a very different kind of response.
Yes. I've had
because
both of
something
those.
I've had that where they'll give me advice. I had that happen once during a job interview where he was advising me on, and this isn't a friendship, but it was very clear during the interview that the thing that motivates him most was money and how that money could help him get women. And he decided that he seemed to assume that would be my motivation as well, because that was the entirety of the pitch of the job of like, how much money can you make? How you can use those things to romance women in some way or something. It was very, and I'm like, to be fair to this guy, we never met, but I was sitting there the whole interview like, if you had ever met me before, you would understand that this is making me never want to work here. I'm never going to work here with you. I don't want to have to interact with you specifically as a potential boss for me. And I do not share the view you have of the world of what's important to us. Why I wanted to do this job is not anything to do with why you want me to do this job.
That's interesting, because that's an example of choosing to be working for, right, somebody who has a completely different value system than you, and you opted out right away. So I think for depth of friendship, I agree with you that there needs to be some values, some strong values and worldview alignment. And you should definitely have friends with different points of view. Yeah, that's one that you can bring.
I think that's a huge value. Sorry, it's a huge value. Like in the example I gave, they need to be able to. You can bring advice or world experiences to bear on the relationship, and they can do as well. But they're not. You're coming from different directions. Even if you have like a shared value system, your experiences are not aligned. Your skills are not aligned. Your experiences are obviously different. How you were raised is going to be somewhat different. And those are still going to give you the ability to give you real input that is valuable to you and to think of things in a way that is different from how you think. And then to either validate or question your decisions or things that you're asking for advice on. So that is critically. Obviously, we don't want clones of ourselves. We don't want automatons who just create echo chambers. To become the best versions of ourselves, we need to avoid echo chambers like that. And that's where tribalism, again, becomes a problem, because in the tribal system, if you are not echoing the party line, so to speak, the accepted dogma, there's no room for you.
Right.
You were rejected. So anyone who would give you advice that is different than the advice that person, like this person might give you the advice, this person has to give you the same advice or they will be rejected.
Right. Yeah.
There's no value in that.
And this is another differentiation I make, right? A healthy community allows lots of room for nuance and heterodox.
Yes.
And a tribe does not, because the focus is quickly friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe. Yeah.
And if foe, you can be dismissed as a person, and also any thoughts that any of your heterodox thoughts will be rejected because you are heterodox.
Yeah. You're on the other team.
There's no value. There's no value in weighing those thoughts or arguments in and of themselves. It's purely that if I disagree with you on this thing, I can reject all the other things that you say because you are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're largely on the same page here. So, relationships is one of the ones that I think I've had the hardest time with, in part because of my story, essentially, where I kind of went to a smaller high school, and then upon exiting that smaller high school, I went to a huge college, university. And while I was there, I had some major health issues, and then B, I had some deaths in the family. And those two things together caused some real significant long-term depression for me.
Mhm.
And so one, my classmates from high school and the friends that I had from there largely dispersed to all sorts of different universities, and work wherever they were working. Two, my college friendship creation was so disrupted by the health issues that I was facing, and the depression I was experiencing, that it was really difficult for me to maintain any of the new relationships. And the folks that were my friends from high school didn't want to spend a lot of time with me because I was low energy,
Mhm.
and was struggling to focus on positive things, for a variety of valid reasons. But that kind of started me off on my adult life without some of those real core childhood friends, and also disrupted my relationship with my sisters. So, yeah, so I kind of got into my mid-20s and had just a few close friends, and my wife. And over time, those few close friends, our lives weren't matching up, both from a life stage perspective. I was married, I started having kids, et cetera, and also from a values perspective. Um, Over time, it was clear enough that our values were diverging that it was kind of hard to have deeper conversations. So, so I kind of ended up in this odd position where I'm trying to have new positive relationships, with people in my late 20s, and then creating new relationships in my 30s, creating new relationships in my
Right.
40s. You're always doing that. Here's what I will say though. You can't make old friends, right? And so when you have a friendship with shared values that has stood the test of time, try to hang on to that. Try to continue to invest in that person. Try to write yourself reminders to reach out, be considerate, see what they're up to, etc. Because you can make new friends, but you can't make old friends.
Right.
And that's something where the few that I still have, I am tremendously grateful for. And the bonds that you create when your brain is in its formative stages, 12 to 20. Oh, you didn't like 12 to 20? 12, let's say 12 to 16 then. But when your brain is forming more, some of those connections, those bonds you form with the friends you create at that time, just like the affinity for music that you have at that time, some of the other core experiences you generate at that time, those are worth hanging on to, because the depth of feeling and the experiences that you can create at those times are pronounced. So not everyone still has those. A lot of full-grown guys have very few or no friends, and I would encourage you to seek them out. It's a lot of rejection to find people that actually are aligned with you on values. The other end of it really is worth it because we do life in community. So look for that. Look for communities, not tribes. Look for shared values over shared interests, but shared interests are fine as a place to start. But yeah, relationships are tough, man. It takes some consideration. One of the things I used to do and want to get back into doing, is that I would have notes for myself in the morning that I would read to remind myself, who do I need to take care of today? Sometimes it was a friend, sometimes it's family members, sometimes it was somebody I was working with. Who do I need to take care of today? And I would try to choose 2 or 3 people that I would specifically go out of my way to connect with. And that's a habit I want to get back into, because I think that intentionality is something that people detect. And it showed up. It showed up in in how my relationships went when I started being really intentional about it. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on relationships, how to maintain them? I think I don't want to put you on the spot here, Duke, but you've done pretty well here, especially given how much you've traveled around and how many different jobs you've worked. You've done pretty well maintaining those friendships.
I think ultimately, if we're going into a situation looking for a friend, I think that puts us on the back foot, if you'll pardon the Anglo term, a little bit, because I think true friendship comes from caring about another person's needs ahead of your own. Now, that doesn't mean putting yourself in situations to just be taken advantage of or one-sided friendships, but I do think it's being open to letting people do that to you sometimes briefly and give them a chance to reciprocate before moving on. I think that sometimes, and I've had this experience, one of my very close friends had not had a lot of friends and was very cynical. And so it did take a little while before he was reciprocating what I was giving to him as a friend because he just didn't believe it. And I think we're operating in a world with a lot of hurt people, a lot of fearful people, a lot of people who have narratives running in their head about what people think of them or how popular they are. As I've become a parent, it's been really interesting to see how far off my children's perspective of how other people view them versus how people actually speak about them when they're not around, how myself and my wife view them is wildly divergent at times. And so I think it's important to remember that people probably like you more than you think, and to take that and be bold and friendly with people as much as you can. If you behave in a way that is friendly towards people, I think that is the way to live. But again, I think if you go into a situation saying, how can I get from this person? You're saying, how can I make a friend? You're ultimately saying, how can this person meet the loneliness needs that I have? If you go into it saying, how can I help them? How can I help them feel welcome? How can I make them feel good about themselves? How can I encourage them if they're going through something difficult? I find that's the best approach in general. It doesn't guarantee results because a friendship has to be a two-way street. But it is the best way to go into it, offering an invitation to that person to reciprocate what you're giving to them. Because ultimately that's what friendship has to be. You cannot be, I'm just taking advantage of you, or you're just taking advantage of me, or we're mutually taking advantage of each other. I see a lot of relationships that are that, where I'm using you in some way and you're using me in some way, and we're just okay with it. That's not a real friendship. In order to have real friendship, you have to risk rejection. You have to risk being taken advantage of, and you have to learn how to recognize when that is happening and when to move on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because staying in those relationships or friendships, because you think you can't do better, in my experience, is worse.
Yep.
Because you only have a finite amount of time that you can invest in relationships. And if you're investing them in abusive relationships or user relationships, you are wasting time. You could be finding someone who actually would give a crap about you, would actually invest back. I see that in dating relationships. There's a lot of times where I see men or women who are with people who are unfaithful, abusive, or just not very kind to them. Maybe but they aren't as bad as maybe other relationships they've had, or they tell themselves that they can't do better, or they are fearful of being alone. That the idea of having no one is scarier to them than having someone that they at least know what to expect from them, even if it's not good.
Yeah.
And they waste time in those relationships that they could be investing in healthier, better relationships. And that always has been something that's been very heartbreaking to me to see. Is you see these people. I think we've all known people in dead end relationships or marriages where they're not happy, they're not getting what they need, but they stay because they are more afraid of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably, I don't say that in judgment. I try to have a lot of sympathy for that situation. I try to empathize with what they're dealing with. But ultimately, they're the ones who have to make that decision. Only they can choose to leave that. And so the results, the negative consequences that come from it are their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
So I try to encourage people where we can. And you have to just let people make those mistakes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I get really, really careful about what advice I give somebody in a one-sided marriage.
Right.
Because of the way that we view marriage. That's not the way everyone views marriage.
Yes.
But because of the way we view marriage, because of how it goes, there are times in your marriage where it may feel like it's one-sided. And it may feel like it's one-sided for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that both people feel like it's one-sided for a long time. And that's one where you need to work towards each other.
They may both be right.
Yeah.
To some extent.
That's where you need to work towards each other, and you need to have those relationships of people in your life that push you back towards each other. Right. One of the most predictive things of a marriage that ends in divorce is friends who are divorced. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have friends that are divorced. It just means that it's a lot easier to go down that path when you've seen that trod by others. If marriage is a convenient financial arrangement where the state gives you privileges and, preferred tax status for you, cool. But I think we have a much deeper view of what that looks like. So, yeah. All right.
Well, and that's a complicated situation, but the bottom line with that for me is to be wise about who you choose to marry or settle down with in a long term. Because there's a lot of people who will, I don't believe in marriage. I'm just going to date this person. We're happy with that. And there's disadvantages to that. There are reasons that might be a mistake. But ultimately, functionally, the things that they're, a lot of the things they're concerned about and why if you ask them why they say they don't believe in marriage, still apply to what they're in.
Yep.
It's just, it provides less legal protection and less standing
in
an official capacity. And that's ultimately like the saddest thing is I see friends who are like, I don't believe in that. Or we don't need to get married. And it's like, someone leaves them and they have no standing. How many people have you ever seen where one or the other spouse leaves? They just abandon the family. If there's not a marriage in place, there's no standing to go after them legally for alimony or for child support. You're just on your own. And so that's a whole messy situation, but being wise about who we choose to commit ourselves to in that way. Cause you're right. I think marriage works best when the two people are really committed to this. And that's going to be a lot more. There's a chance they'll be one-sided at times.
Yeah.
Sometimes for long periods, but we believe that there is power in marriage and that there can be redemption. Whether that's through maturing and growing up, whether that's through supernatural changing of someone's heart.
Marriage works best in threes.
Yes.
Marriage works best in threes, folks. The husband.
You heard it here first.
The husband, the wife, and God.
In this scenario.
The threesome in this case is two humans and God. Don't get it twisted. Yeah. No, and that's where.
Please let David know in the comments what you think of these.
Yeah, that's something where, again, if you're not on that Christian point of view and you see marriage as a liability because it gives people power to punish you for your bad behavior or theirs, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Anyway, that was more on marriage than I was planning to do.
We can talk about how marriage itself is a high trust society concept in some ways.
Well, there are lots of low trust societies with much better records
Right.
when you look at marriage
that's
statistics.
the only high trust relationship they have.
Well, it's because of social enforcement,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's other things like that.
There's, especially
the
clan.
divorce rate among arranged marriages is far, far lower than
Correct.
in the West.
Yeah.
So,
Clan-oriented people versus atomized individuals, right? Highly
hyper
individualistic.
individualized.
Yep.
I think America and the West was largely founded on individual liberty, individualism.
Mhm.
I think we've reached a point where that's even higher now than it was then.
Yeah. Well, that's a later conversation.
Yes.
The discussion of communal societies versus individualistic societies versus atomized individualism. And
At what point does an individualized society break apart because there's no more cohesion between those individual pieces?
yep. Let's save that one for later.
Society requires individuals
Mhm.
working together as a unit
Mhm.
in some way. But theoretically, for lack of a better term, they become demagnetized from each other. Is that still a society anymore? At what point does that cross that threshold?
Yeah. And I think the historians and anthropologists would disagree with you that society requires individuals. I think they would,
I mean,
you know,
I guess it depends on what your definitions are, but
that's fair.
I'm saying there is yet to be a human centipede that could vote. I'm going to talk about individuals. I'm talking about
Yes.
people. You can talk about how the culture views people
Mhm.
as individuals or not.
Yeah. Voting
But they're
is
still
also
human beings.
voting is also an individualistic thing, and not broadly how societies have handled themselves
I understand
in
that.
history.
Again, I'm talking about definitions here.
Yes, I get it.
I'm talking about individuals as
Mhm.
individual entities,
Yep.
not
Often it was tribes, clans, and groups of people based on location. So,
Mhm.
but that's anyway. Okay, harkening back to what you were saying about be the one who takes the first step. I'm going to sign off here with something I've signed off with dozens of times in other contexts. If you're lonely, be the one that reaches out to somebody else. Don't wait for someone to reach out to you. Offer to them the connection that you're looking for. This is the way to help others, to focus on others instead of yourself, and to improve the way you operate in the world. Because if you're only focused on your own needs being met, you will not be the kind of person that gets those needs met. Yeah. All right. Becoming our age, learning, laughs, relationships, responsibility. This was our deeper conversation on relationships. Thanks for being here. And please give us a like, subscribe if you like this content. Let us know what you think. Send me hate messages about marriages are best in threes. Cheers.